You let me know when we're ready, Shelley.
Okay, about 30 seconds.
We're going to do this like we did the board meeting. So I'll give an introduction too.
Okay, we're good to go. Just wait for, yeah, we've got 24 on so far.
We'll give it another minute.
Lisa, you can see that as well, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending our Return to Learn webinar. My name is Lisa Leali. I'm the superintendent of District 65. And with me today is our administrative team and my right-hand woman, Shelley Goff. So we're going to introduce ourselves, and I will just go around since Zoom is a little bit difficult. We're all in different rooms. So Nate, would you start?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Nate Blackmer, and I'm the principal at Lake Bluff Middle School.
Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe Jaxie. I'm the assistant principal of Lake Bluff Middle School.
Kelly?
Good morning, everyone. Kelly Bay, principal of Lake Bluff Elementary School.
Audrey?
Good morning, Audrey Jurov, the Lake Bluff Elementary assistant principal.
Tracy?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy Rourke, the Director of Student Services.
And Jay?
Hi, I'm Jay Kahn, Director of Finance and Operations.
So again, we thank you for joining us this morning. We know that this is a very difficult time to be an educator. I'm going to be able to look at the attendees on the webinar in a minute, but I would imagine some of our teachers are here, some of our staff, as well as parents. And we are going to start the presentation today with some of the questions that we've been asked since the last board meeting where we presented. And since our final or our most recent Return to Learn Task Force meeting. So we'll begin with kind of the frequently asked questions that we've been getting, and then we would like to open it up for more questions after that. So I am going to share my screen. I want to make sure I am sharing the right thing here. Hold on one second. Shelley, would you mind sharing? Mine is not. Can you share the presentation that I had? Mine is not doing it.
I just changed host over to you. See if that works. If not, I will do that.
It's not letting me see my preview.
Okay.
Sorry, everyone, I'm using a new computer today.
Hold on one second.
So we are going to begin with the first question, and it's okay that it's not on the screen. The first and most frequently asked question that we've had is, so we understand that we have a choice between sending our students to school and keeping them home. But what is not understood is kind of why we're using remote learning as the platform in either place.
I need you to transfer host back to me. Sorry.
That's okay. Hold on one second. There you go. And I'm going to start by answering that question the way we talked about this in the board meeting, and I'd love for our administrative team to jump in too if I miss anything. But essentially, the reason that we are trying for remote learning to be the platform that we use as our foundation and our primary resource for instruction this year is for consistency. As you know, we've talked about the fact that our guidelines that we need to follow are continually being updated. We received guidance late last week from the Illinois State Board of Education that reinforced the fact that we will have students in and out of school. We will have staff in and out of school for various reasons this year. Even in a regular year, a normal year, we know that we sometimes have shortages of staff and substitutes due to illness. We're anticipating, obviously, given the current crisis, that we're going to have more absences more long-term absences because of self-quarantining and the amounts of time that people will have to do that if they come in contact or close contact with someone who is positive for COVID-19. So the goal is that throughout this kind of disjointed year that we're anticipating we're going to have with absences in students and staff, we would like one primary foundational piece to stay consistent for students. Because what we don't want to have happen is what happened in the spring, where it felt like 1 year and then we moved into a different situation and it felt like a totally new situation. We want to make sure that everyone's comfortable with that remote platform, given the fact that individual students, individual classrooms, and potentially all of our whole school will have to eventually go into remote learning at some point this year. So that is the main reason for utilizing remote learning as our primary platform. There are a couple other reasons too. One is also that our staff, we want to make sure that they feel focused in their planning and they're able to collaborate effectively, given that, again, we'll be having students in our buildings and outside of our buildings. And we know that our capacity in terms of staff is limited, and we want to make sure that we do one thing really, really well, as opposed to trying to design two totally different platforms really well and address the needs of the two different groups really well. We want to make sure that we focus our efforts on that platform that we know will be used at some point by every one of our students and staff in the upcoming year based on the information that we're getting. So the companion question to that then is, then I don't understand how that's going to look in the classroom. How are we going to be using remote learning as the in-person platform for instruction? And the way that we see it working is this: we would have teachers as facilitators of that remote learning platform. So what they would probably do is have their morning meeting with the students that are in class with them. And that would be an in-person get together, kind of checking in on everyone's emotional state. How's everyone feeling today? Previewing the day, just like a normal classroom would have a morning meeting. The students who are remote would also be doing that. They would just be doing it remotely, having that synchronous check-in, checking in on how people are feeling, and kind of previewing the day. The direct instruction for each of the core content areas then would be also done remotely for everyone. So if I'm in the building, I would log in and have my direct instruction portion of the lesson be remote so that I can get used to the Zoom platform. I can see the same things that my remote counterparts are seeing, and we have that shared experience together. Once the direct instruction portion of the lesson is over, then the in-person teacher would be able to support students with their needs as they move through their work. So let's say the direct instruction portion is 20-25 minutes, then they log off of that, and then the in-person teacher supports them moving through the assignment with any questions they have. There might be time for limited interaction or dialogue between students. Again, recognizing that there are some safety procedures that we need to put in place. Desks will all be facing the same way. We're not going to be having table group conversations, but of course we can have discussion. It's just not going to feel the same. And then obviously in person, those teachers will be walking students through their schedule. They'll be moving them from topic to topic, from content area to content area, providing breaks, facilitating their lunchtime, taking them outside. So the idea is that that in-person teacher would be walking them through that day. Additionally, the remote teacher would also be walking their students through their day. So while they may be providing remote instruction for all the students, again, when it's time for that differentiated support, the remote teacher would be providing that differentiated support to the students who are learning at home. And they would be then again walking the children through that same schedule of day. So the idea is to keep everyone consistent in terms of what that day feels like and what it looks like, so that inevitably when students are home having to do remote learning, that it feels consistent, it's a seamless or more seamless transition. They're used to the tools, they're used to the resources, and we can move kids ahead academically. So here we are on our presentation. Thank you, Shelley, for figuring that out. I apologize for the delay. Usually this works pretty well. So we're going to move forward. If you can, move forward. And I'll just make sure one more slide that I've addressed all that. Okay, let's move forward to the next question. Will there be guidelines for the amount of synchronous versus asynchronous instruction for the students who are doing remote learning at home? Well, in other words, will there be more synchronous instruction than there was in the spring? Let's move forward to the next slide. The answer is yes. Our teaching teams will have guidelines for synchronous learning. I just talked about the new guidance that we received late last week, and the ISB guidelines indicate 2.5 hour minimum of synchronous instruction if students are learning completely at home on a remote platform. I will tell you that, the middle school schedule has been a bit more difficult for us to figure out logistics on. And this latest guidance from ISB has put us in a different spot in our thinking. So Nate and Joe will be working with the teacher leaders at the middle school to continue to refine what that schedule will look like. And I need you parents and teachers who are on the call today to stay tuned for more information on the middle school schedule. I know Kelly and Audrey are working out the finer points of the elementary schedule as well. But again, this is what we talked about in the board presentation. We're assuming, and we have to assume this, that our guidelines are going to continue to change. We're going to continue to get more and new guidelines as folks work on the best way to do this that we need to adhere to. So again, yes, there will be more synchronous instruction. We were planning for that anyway. Now we have some more firm guidance as of late last week. Okay, so I understand I think a lot of our parents and families understand that we are encouraging those who can stay home to stay home. Some of the phone calls and emails that I've had over the last few days are just sort of parents asking, but what does it mean if I can stay home? What does that mean for me? I'm not sure what to do here because I just want the right learning environment for my child and I want them to be safe. And the fact of the matter is, we'll move on to the next slide. This is a family decision. There are no criteria. We are not, assuming that any type of family will take advantage of remote versus in-person instruction. To be honest, this really has to do with your own child, your children, and where they learn best and what you feel like, given the information that you have, will work best for your student. I can tell you that for us, the students who come to school with us, we will do the best we absolutely can to differentiate instruction, given that they will be working off of that foundational platform. We'll provide answers to their questions. We will provide an engaging and stimulating environment. Our top priority is going to be safety and following those guidelines and making sure our safety protocols are implemented with fidelity when people are with us in the school. And that's obviously because, not yet, can we move back, Shelley? With our remote learning program, our obvious, and top priority there is academic achievement and growth, which is the same for our students in school. So again, that consistency piece academically for that remote learning platform to give our teachers the opportunity to collaborate and to work together to make the best platform that we can for all of our students. That's why the focus is there. If students choose to come with us for whatever reason, whatever the family decides, we will absolutely do our best to keep them safe and make sure that they are getting a stimulating and engaging environment, and the same for our students who choose to be at home. So then the big question is, well, why? I just don't, there's still kind of a confusion around why can't all students just come back? We'll just follow the safety guidance, keep everyone safe, and have everyone come back. So for that, I think we really need to go ahead and review what are the guidelines that we need to follow. And for that, we'll move on to the next slide. The biggest and most kind of difficult one for us to follow is the physical distancing. We do need to have 6 feet between individuals at all times. And that is, the exception is the bus. And again, this is where we're encouraging our families to provide transportation if they can, because the guidance on buses is that we can have up to 50 students on a bus, which means that we cannot maintain 6 feet of physical distance between students on a bus. But in school, we must maintain that 6 foot distance. Our classrooms as they are cannot hold an entire class with furniture in that amount of space. So we will repurpose other areas in the school and make them into classrooms, but obviously there are things that we need to consider with that as well. We know that when students are indoors, we need to watch ventilation. If windows can be open, they need to be open, and that is our goal, to find spaces in schools where we can open windows and increase ventilation. If we can't, and Jay can talk about this maybe later if we get into more of the safety protocols, we're looking at our HVAC system and increasing the ability for our ventilation system to move fresh air and circulate air through the buildings. We also need to consider the space in the building in the context of the rest of the building and whether or not we're increasing interactions between groups of people, because we need to minimize those, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We have secured tents for outdoor learning at each of the schools because we know there are some programs that we just cannot do inside. We cannot have kids singing. We can't have kids playing instruments inside. We know they need to get out to move around. So we're trying to even increase our outdoor space and keep folks, sheltered a bit from the weather, either the warmth or the precipitation. So 6 feet between individuals at all times, that's inside and outside. And that is one of the biggest guidelines that we're looking to enforce. And one of the biggest reasons that we want to, if people can stay home, because the more students that stay home, the better we will be able to keep to that 6 foot distance inside. We know that masks will be worn at all times inside. The minimizing interactions between individuals has to do with contact tracing. We've all heard a lot about what happens when there's a positive COVID case in the community or, in the school. And if we come to that situation, which we're anticipating that we probably will, either that someone who comes to school has been in close contact with someone who has a positive case, or somebody who is diagnosed as positive has been in our school, we absolutely need to inform and all of the people who have been in close contact with that person, and that they will need to self-quarantine for 14 days, and that's to watch for symptoms. The definition of close contact is less than 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, non-consecutive. So over the course of a day for more than 15 minutes, masked or unmasked. It doesn't matter if they are masked or unmasked. And obviously, students that are in school with us are going to be, as much as possible kept in one location, but obviously there are going to be times when students need to go outside or come within a certain amount of distance between people. So our goal is to minimize interactions so that we can effectively contact trace and quarantine when people are diagnosed as positive. For that reason, we will also not be sharing materials. So that changes the way we organize our classroom, changes the way we organize some of our content. If you can think about art class or gym class, some of these areas where kids would typically be sharing equipment, we can't do that because we need to sanitize and disinfect that equipment each time. And we want to make sure we can do that with fidelity. Obviously, our screening and symptom checks, we've talked about that at the board meeting, but when a student, this is something that we just learned late last week. This is important to know. Another kind of limiting factor for us is that any student or staff member, per new guidance, will go home if they've exhibited any symptom of COVID. And the symptoms of COVID are increasing as time goes on. So, just if a student is exhibiting a cough, obviously if they have a fever, but runny nose was added to the list. So sneezing, those kinds of things. If they are exhibiting any of those symptoms, we must send them home unless they have a documented medical condition with us in school. They will be asked to seek medical attention and can only return with a doctor's note. That is symptoms only. So obviously, that is going to cause us substantial disruption. And when a student is sent to the nurse with symptoms, we are needing to isolate them from other students and then also supervise them until we can have someone take them home. So again, when we talk about our facilities, we're a little bit more limited in the spaces that we have because we have to keep kids apart. Obviously, not every student who has a cough or has a runny nose has COVID. Not every student who has a fever has COVID. There's lots of illnesses, that we know that students could be having, and we have to keep them individually separated and supervised because we don't want to be having kids with symptoms infecting each other or within close contact of each other. So this is also limiting our facility space and staffing capacity. And then obviously we're looking at increasing disinfection and sanitation. So if I choose to be in school, but I have to stay home sick for a day or two, or I'm sent home with symptoms, or I'm sent home to self-quarantine, can I just participate in remote learning that day, or those 2 days, or those 5 days? The answer is yes. And we want you to. And that's why we're trying for that consistency. Can we move ahead for the slide? We're trying for that consistent platform because we know in a normal year, we have students who are out with illness. And we have teachers who are out with illness. And obviously we are anticipating that this is going to happen more frequently now. And we want to provide a seamless way for children to continue to engage in instruction, be on the same page with their peers, whether they're in or out of school. So a lot of questions about what the criteria are to move back into remote learning. If we were to all have to shift back into a remote learning platform, what would the criteria be to move back to normal? So we'll go through that a little bit. We've been lucky, if we can move forward on the slide, we've been lucky to work a lot with the Lake County Health Department. And I mean, the Lake County superintendents of all the districts, they are monitoring positivity rates. And we know that there will be more guidance coming out to us as we move through this process. But essentially, we can bring some students to school with all these safety guidelines in phase 4 implemented, as long as we have less than an 8% positivity rate in the region. And that means less than 8% of the tests that are done for COVID are positive. And our region is Lake County and I believe McHenry County. So that region together has to maintain less than 8% positivity rate for us to remain in phase 4 and continue to bring students into school. That's my understanding. Once Illinois declares phase 5, which we know includes a vaccination at this point, we should be able to resume as normal. However, you know, we all watch the conversation and it continues to evolve, and it will, I imagine, because there is a growing sense of nervousness around a vaccination for a lot of folks in the community. Obviously, we are moving forward quickly to find a vaccination, and I think that may be making some folks nervous. Just because we have a vaccination doesn't mean it will be readily available right away, and it doesn't mean that many people will want to participate right away in doing that. So my best answer to that is phase 5 is our best chance of getting back to a normal situation where all students can join us. Whether or not all students will at that point remains to be seen. So a lot of questions about the hybrid model, excuse me. So what is the hybrid model? So we'll move forward. The hybrid model is essentially, we want to offer parents the opportunity, if they'd like, to be in school with us some days a week and home doing remote learning other days a week, if we can accommodate it. Like I said at the board meeting, we're not sure that we can. It will depend on enrollment and how many families choose to be at home and how many families choose to be with us. But that's why we asked families to let us know if they would want to be contacted about this, because we would like to accommodate it if we can. So it would be, again, with us for some full days a week and then at home for other full days a week. And we will be contacting the families that asked us to do that on a case-by-case basis. Some questions about who is involved in making the recommendation that we have made. And obviously, we have had a lot of folks involved, so we'll move ahead. Our entire administrative team has been involved. Teachers have been involved in lots of different ways through their leadership teams, through the Return to Learn task force. Our union leadership has been involved since very early on in planning. Parents and community members are on the task force as well, and 2 Board of Education members on the task force. What I do want to say, though, is that we did make a pivot before the board meeting and before that presentation. And we called a last minute task force meeting to address that kind of shift in our thinking. And the basic shift in our thinking was to use remote learning for all of our students and for our teacher planning. We were always kind of looking at an option of having folks be at home or in school. And so our planning really revolved around how could we design a schedule for both that would work whether students were in school with us or out of school. and how could we maintain consistency. And there were a lot of roadblocks that we were coming up against when we were thinking about designing 2 different programs, giving parents choice and having them, either opt in or opt out. The hard thing for us was, how do we create a situation where, regardless of where students are, if they choose to be with us, it will be a seamless experience when they go out. Because the more that we were hearing from the health department, the more that we followed the news, there is a high likelihood that we will be having folks out of school. And so the shift in our thinking was really, in order to create the most amount of consistency, we want to use that remote learning platform as a springboard for our thinking, a springboard for our planning, and ensure that all kids feel comfortable with that platform. We put all of our best resources towards that platform. And then the value added for students that are in school would be that the teacher is there facilitating that, answering their questions, engaging them in dialogue, moving them through the schedule, as opposed to that happening remotely with a teacher at home. Admin team, is there anything that I missed that you'd like to emphasize before we go on to answering questions? Okay, with that, the system that we have that we'll do is what we did with the board meeting. And essentially, if you go to your participants panel at the bottom of your screen, or potentially it could be at the top, you will see a list of participants, and then you will also see the ability for you to raise your hand. If you could click on the little button that says raise hand, then we will go ahead and call people one at a time. You will be promoted into the webinar, so we'll see you. You can ask your question, and then we will have somebody else ask their question. So with that, Shelley.
It's Kim Frano. Go ahead, Kim.
Hi. My question is, are you planning for kids who are doing remote learning? Will you be providing like the iPads or Chromebooks, whatever you'll be using for kindergarten?
Yes, the answer is yes. And they will be iPads for kindergartners.
Okay.
So yes.
And then can I also ask the reasoning for starting so late in the day, especially for working parents? Like, I'm a teacher, but we're going back full day. So how does that work with children who don't have coverage and for someone to watch them from 7 to 10 and then from 2 to 5 per se? Is there ARC or?
Yes. So the answer is yes. The Park District will support us with before school care until we start. So that before school care will still be in place, and then it will go all the way up until our school day starts. And then the after school care will also be there. Obviously, they're going to be adhering to the same safety guidelines and making sure that, kids are distant and physically distant from each other, still be masks. I don't know exactly how that will look, but they will be providing that care. The reason for the late start really has to do with a couple of things. One is that we need our teachers to have some time to plan every day, knowing that we have teachers doing both, kind of, some doing that remote platform with kids and some doing that in person. We really want to stay tight and create consistency. And during the day, because our schedules have to be modified so much to cohort kids together and keep them together, they won't have that plan time during the day. The other piece is to is to limit the amount of time that kids need to be in masks and participating and learning this way. It's not going to feel like regular school. There's not going to probably be as many opportunities for kids. We'll do it as much as we can, but to move around and they can't interact with other kids. So the goal is to kind of limit it, get that instruction done in a really streamlined way, and also have some time for our teachers to collaborate and do sometimes other remote teaching that we might have to do outside the school day anyway. We're still thinking about things like band, and things that we can't do in the classroom. So that 2-hour window gives us some time too for other remote opportunities.
Okay, so then if my daughter has teacher A, for example, would she be with her 5 days a week?
If she's in school?
Yes.
Yes, that would be the goal. And the goal is to have that in-person teacher be a grade level teacher for that grade. The reason that I say that's the goal and not the reality is just the issue that we're anticipating we're going to have people out because of illness or contact. And so I can't, while I can guarantee more that there will be consistency with the remote situation because there's safe distance and people can participate even if they're quarantined, but not showing symptoms, I can't guarantee that in person. So yes, the goal is to have it be a grade level teacher. The goal is to have it be consistent. I just think we'll run into more problems that way because of the direct contact.
Okay, and then one last question. What's your platform for remote learning?
Google Classroom will be the consistent platform. We're working out, we have a teacher group working on some of the logistics for the younger kiddos especially. So you talked about having a kindergartner. There are some things, we used Seesaw in the past and a lot of districts use Seesaw. My own kids used it. There were some great features of that. We're looking to kind of try to use some plugins with Google Classroom to mirror that. But the goal is to have a consistent platform for all of our families to be able to interact with.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Okay, Jason Glassman.
Good morning. I had a quick couple questions. One, just looking at the form here, it mentions that we will have to remain in this selection until at least 11/20, so right up to Thanksgiving. When that date passes, for whatever reason, if we wanted to change or continue, are we going to have another choice? So after that first trimester, am I going to be able to, because I'm a teacher as well, and my wife works, but her job might be going home or going back to the office. So would I be able to put my child into the school setting after that date?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking it. Yes. So basically the form that you just got on Friday, we will send out again prior to trimester 2, which is before November, and then we'll send it again before trimester 3.
Okay.
The reason for that is we know that this changes all the time. And we want to give people the opportunity, and we know, just like you're indicating, your home circumstances may change. So we want to give people the opportunity to opt back in. The only reason that we have to have those benchmarks is because depending on how people answer that question, we may really need to reorganize the way we're doing instruction if the numbers really change.
Okay. Would that expand? Because as I said, I was a teacher, I'm teaching private school, pre-K through 12, and we're all full in. And if I had the option of taking my daughter with me, would I be able to re-enroll her as a LBES student for the second trimester? So if a student is pulled out of the school, there's not an issue of me re-enrolling her as a student. Okay.
No.
I want to make sure. I don't want her to have to wait till her next folds.
Yeah, no, whenever families decide to enroll their students, we will gladly take them. And depending on where we are with,
Right.
in person and absolutely. The other question, and it's good that you brought that up. Some folks had asked, what if I just decide to homeschool my kid for a certain portion of the year? That's fine. And when you want to come back with us, that's fine.
Okay.
I had a question about what if I homeschool for certain subjects and I want my child to do certain other subjects remotely? We will work with you on that too. And we can probably make that happen. The real constraining factor for us is who is coming to school.
Right. Okay.
Physical logistics of keeping kids apart and doing what we need to do in order to be able to effectively contact trace and keep everyone safe. That's really the constraining factor for us. So we will be very, very flexible with folks who have other circumstances. If students, come to school and decide that that's not a match, this is not what is working for them, they can transfer out and go remote. It's the transferring in that is difficult for us because there's just a lot behind the scenes that we have to do to keep everyone safe.
Okay, just last thing regarding the teachers in the classroom, because I remember in the presentation last week, it was moderators / facilitators, or one of the two. So my question is it, and I know you don't have, are they current teachers at LBES, or are you hiring teachers outside the district or wherever to play that temporary role? Just a little wanted a little bit more clarification. And finally with that, will my student have a teacher? Like my daughter had a teacher in first grade and kindergarten. Will she be assigned her sort of her special or her go-to teacher?
Great questions. So we did talk about that in-person teacher being a facilitator of that remote learning piece. And I do want to clarify, I appreciate you asking it. That was in no means meant to, kind of downplay the role of that in-person teacher. Like I just said to the last question, that we want that to be a grade level teacher that will be able to support the students in the classroom with the learning that's taking place with that remote learning piece. And they'll be facilitating and moving through that day, but the goal is to have it be a classroom teacher that's grade level appropriate. The reason that we talked about it being a facilitator and is really because we know we're going to have staff out, whether it's going to be because of self-quarantine, whether they have their own childcare issues and need to take a leave, whether we can't work out some of those specifics for some of our teachers. I don't know. I don't have the answer at this point. The goal is that it's a grade level teacher that's with the students in school as consistent as possible. And so if you choose in person, you will have a teacher that you're assigned to. And then obviously, if we need to provide substitute coverage, you know how that works, right?
Yeah.
And then the remote teacher, if you decide to be in a remote program, you will also be assigned a teacher. It's just that in-person group will also be working with the remote teacher at times during the day.
Okay.
Just so that they understand that platform and they can move seamlessly in and out if they need to.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Jason.
Okay, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay. My question is regarding special education and how the school is going to meet the minutes that each student has in their IEP, and will those minutes be individualized and specific to that student, or will it be a group setting, or how are you going to go about doing that?
So thank you for that question, and I'm going to let Tracy Rorick, our Director of Student Services, answer it. I also want to just really briefly mention that this is going to be a big topic for us at our next Return to Learn Task Force on Thursday. So if you haven't been tuning in to those, make sure you check it out, because Tracy will be doing a lot more, helping with the concerns on that on Thursday's meeting. But go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you. This is a really great question, and one that our teams are working through all of the logistics. A couple of the things that we need to think about when we move to kind of this new learning environment is something called the least restrictive environment, which is really important to take into consideration when considering what supports and services are written into your child's plan. And so we know with the change of the length of school day and the way that our general education school day is running, that least restrictive environment is changing. Now, that being said, our goal is really to look at individual learning plans and make our best faith effort to implement them as written. Now, that may not be the case for every scenario and every situation based on whether students are in the building or in a remote learning environment. For example, an individual student may have some services where they are pulled out into small groups, and that could happen 3 or 4 times within a given day. You may look at that and say, that's too many times to be pulled out into small groups with different students. And for health and safety reasons, we may want to talk about that and have some services delivered remotely. Now, our case managers will be going through every child's individualized plan and working individually with families to talk through whether or not our plans are going to be implemented as written or if adjustments need to be made. And so that's going to be an ongoing process at the start of the school year. But the goal would be that every single parent knows and is informed and part of that collaborative decision-making process to be able to help determine the best plan for each student.
Okay, has there been any thought of having, as you say, like a cohort of 3 specific students with 1 special education teacher, as opposed to being in their grade level class, and have that be their small group learning ability, and then they're not exposed to so many kids and don't have to walk around for their special education portion of their learning?
Yes, so that's something that the case managers will be working on before the start of the school year.
Okay.
We'll be looking at their current class placements. We'll be determining if those placements still are the best places, if we need to group students a little bit differently for their services. So the case managers will be working together as teams to find those best placements for students and the best way to deliver services, whether that be in person or remote, depending on family choice. And then really, like you said, minimizing that movement. I think that that is something that we're really going to have to look at for even in-person learning, is minimizing movement within the building.
And just one final question. So since we don't know those answers for the special ed portion of it, but we have to make our decision then could change based upon what the special education portion is. So if we choose to do remote, but we've already missed that window to join in person, are there going to be any special circumstances for those children to change at that point?
So given our scheduling, our elementary school schedules and middle school schedules will be the same. So regardless of whether you're in person or not in person, those schedules should, in most scenarios, be the same regardless of your choice. Now, if there are individual instances where something is different, more so than we've expected or anticipated, then we could potentially speak with families on an individual level and see if a change needs to be made.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in real quick. Students with IEPs, students with needing specialized accommodations, we're going to work with you to make the right solution. It will be, the logistics of this are really difficult and complicated. And I understand that as we get our enrollment in, that kind of feeling around it is going to change for families. I want you to be assured that our students at risk or who have specific learning needs are at the top of the list for us to work with. I also want to point out that there will probably be times when, even if a student chose to go remote and be at home, that we might ask for them to come in. And a specific instance would be, for example, assessment. For our younger students, when we're looking to really get a good assessment of their reading ability or something like that, some of those things don't translate remotely. And we will probably be looking to have people, even if they're at home, come in with us in a small group in a really safe way so that we can assess or that we can have a conversation.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, Lauren, you're set. You can talk.
Good morning. I'm having a little trouble envisioning, in probably mostly a middle school scenario, how kids who are in different class selections, for instance, French versus Spanish, Math 1 versus Math 2, how they will stay put in a classroom or cohort, but if there are different choices, if like I'm in Spanish and my person in the desk next to me is in French. So can you help me through how that works for math, LA, Spanish, singing versus, or choir versus gym class in a middle school scenario?
Yes, I'm going to toss it to Nate and Joe for this one.
Well, I'll do my best to answer it with the understanding that, and we keep going back to this idea of knowing how many students will be in the building versus out of the building as being such important decision, information for us to have in order to make some decisions about that. The goal, of course, is to have as few kids as possible in a classroom space, right? To maintain social distancing, but also for that purpose, we know that we're going to have kids in a space accessing different classes at the same time. Certainly going to be utilizing headsets for that, having kids interacting with their speakers off, but being able to hear. If we have 15 kids doing different things all at the same time, it could be a challenge. We may have to restructure and move them throughout the building to minimize as much mixing of kids as possible, but also to make sure that they can interact with the computer in a way that doesn't disrupt the learning of other kids at the same time. So we'll have a better idea of how many kids would be in each classroom once we know how many are going to be coming to school. We have done this before where kids are recording their voice in a classroom where others are speaking at the same time. It certainly works as long as you don't have too many kids doing that all at once. But that's part of why we're on the remote platform, is to give us the flexibility to have multiple kids doing things at the same time. I just couldn't tell you how many are going to be in a classroom yet. I just don't have that information.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Sorry, on the survey that for opting in or out, I was surprised by the question for a hybrid day. So I don't know that I answered that accurately or thoughtfully. So, and I'm unsure at this time would have been a great option because I don't know what that looks like for you guys. Like, I've been watching the Zooms and I haven't heard that before. So I haven't been able to picture what that is like. And anyway, I just wanted to say, I might be that person who calls and says, I changed my answer.
Actually, there have already been a few of those emails and calls like, oops, I didn't mean to say what I said. So can you change it for me? We will do it. So just let us know. It's no problem. I'm sure that as this gets clarified, or as you talk through it more with your loved ones, you know, to decide what the best thing is, just let us know. It's not a problem. We'll adjust it on our end. The hybrid was really, I mean, I know that I've gotten a lot of emails asking, what if I just don't want to go every day, but I want my child to be in school sometimes? We might be able to accommodate it. Again, to Nate's point, there's a lot we can't do logistically until we know what people want. So we're asking for an opt-in or out, and then whether or not you want to be contacted for a hybrid, because we would have to work that out internally.
Okay, Vanessa.
Hi. Thank you guys so much for putting all this time and effort into these programs. I really appreciate all the dedication. I know we're all working with some craziness right now, so really appreciate your time, guys. I have a couple questions and they're a little all over the board, so please bear with me. The first one is, I've got a kindergartner coming in, and the idea of kindergarten online is mind-boggling. So could you just kind of wrap my mind around what does that really mean? You know, versus like my second grader and my fourth grader, I understand are a little bit more structured, teachers giving lessons. Like, what does kindergarten online mean?
So do you mean, so we'll go through each of them, and I'm going to let Kelly weigh in on this too, but essentially we know that there are special considerations for our youngest learners, pre-K, K, and 1 in particular. And one of the things that we know about those learners is we need to be moving quickly through different types of activities to keep them engaged, so that they cannot be in one place doing one thing for any more than, if you've been in a kindergarten classroom, usually any more than 10 to 15 minutes is too much. Right. So know that that's best practice. That's going to happen no matter where, if they're online or if they are with us in school doing those different activities. So we know that we need to structure that instruction in the way that works best for those students. So that's going to happen regardless. But Kelly, do you want to talk a little bit more about what you've thought about?
Sure. I mean, some of the initial things that come to mind in conversations or email exchanges that I've had with parents, I feel like we're all starting with this idea of no one ever imagined this. You know, you have visions of what it's going to be like for your 5-year-old to start kindergarten. And this was definitely not on the horizon or anything that any of us imagined. One of the first things that comes to mind is really the relationship piece. And so we know that really finding ways for students, our incoming kindergartners, to develop relationships with their teacher is going to be meaningful. And important, and we'll need to create space for that to happen. I also think developing relationships with their peers is a place that we need to create space. And so we've had some successful experiences in the spring that we would want to carry forward and to model and demonstrate. And then we also know that there are a variety of experiences now where teachers are going on and learning themselves about best practices for remote learning and specific to the youngest learners. Thinking about a day that really has frequent breaks so that, as you said, students are not sitting in front of their screen at 5 years old for extended amounts of time. One of the things that was not a pillar of our remote learning in the spring was some of that authentic learning, where there could perhaps be paper pencil or cutting, gluing kind of experiences. And so we're really thinking carefully and creatively about how we can create space for parents to possibly pick up supplies. We haven't worked out the logistics of that, but we know that there are so many things about being a kindergartner don't just have to do with being on that screen and the learning that happens there. So we're thinking about constructing our schedules in a way that are really meaningful, engaging, and can maximize the time. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Lisa, you touched a little bit about the positivity rating of less than 8% to kind of help guide. And I just want to understand, because right now we're at less than 4%, at least for our county region area. So can you just elaborate on what does that mean for kids coming back in? And I mean, I know you said normal school day, not until we have a vaccine, but I'm also I'm trying to understand, like, are we envisioning this e-learning platform for this entire school year? Or is there a moment where you would say, like, you know, everybody can come back, still wear masks if that's the case, but like we will have teachers in place and more collaborative learning or more in-person learning versus this e-learning platform if we continue a lower positivity rate?
Thanks for that question. That's a good question. As we talk to the Lake County Health Department, I cannot emphasize enough that this is such a new and changing situation for even our healthcare system and professionals working through what is the right data to monitor, what are the right data, what are the pieces we need to be looking at, how do we shift the state, you know, thinking in different areas. So we have even moved in the last couple of months from, you know, we're all in this doing the same thing across the state to now we're in regions and we're looking at our regional data and our local data to make those decisions. I don't envision, to be honest with you, I don't know what this year will look like, but I do think until we're in phase 5, there's going to be a significant amount of parent choice, and that we want to work with our parents what they feel comfortable with. Right now, you know, we built our plan off of, you know, 80% of our families coming in. So, and just to put that in a normal year, I'm gonna put this back to where I was in the fall. I wasn't here. I was in another district. But in November of this last school year, we were reaching 10 to 15% of students on any given day out for illness at that time. That was before coronavirus even started. That was strep throat, stomach flu, regular flu. So we were getting up around 15% on a daily basis anyway. So the issue of, you know, how many kids we can accommodate in class, you know, I'm anticipating if we're in phase 4, we're still going to have these guidelines. We're still going to have to keep kids separated. We're still going to have to do the masks. I'm also anticipating that we will continue to have a community split in terms of whether or not they want their child in that environment. So the only thing I think that I can say right now to that is, yes, we're still in phase 4. We're still in a safe zone to bring kids back. The goal for us, again, knowing that kids will be out and in, knowing that community sentiment is very, very different depending on the household. What our goal is to create a consistency for kids and to make sure that we can maximize our time with them, whether they're online with us due to being quarantined or sick or teachers are quarantined or sick, trying to maintain consistency so we don't lose time, if that makes sense.
Okay. Final question. One of the things I was wondering about is just assistance. So I know that you said we would be having, for example, math, a lesson was going to be given, and then they get independent work. But will the teacher who gave the lesson be accessible online to students, not just to chat, but to see their face? I feel like sometimes, at least my children had a really hard time communicating with their teacher through chat to ask a question and like get the follow-up and all that stuff. So will there be an opportunity, whether it's maybe doing small groups of kids, you know, breakouts or something online, but just so that the kids can ask, you know, questions and simultaneously continue to ask that, you know, continue to dig into trying to understand something, versus what, you know, last time it was just more chatting and then you had to set up a meeting like an hour later. And I just feel like a lot of times that was very frustrating for my child, because then they're sitting there waiting for an hour to be able to talk to a teacher to understand their homework, to be able to do it. And then it just was downhill from there.
So the short answer is yes. We learned that lesson in the spring, and I think that was, it was very new for us, that situation. So the short answer is yes, the teachers will be accessible. I don't know the system for that just yet, but yes, that's the goal of structuring the day that way. So there would be that direct instruction piece, and then there would be follow-up differentiation and support. We recognize that Chromebooks and Zoom don't mesh too well just right now. So we are working with our tech director to figure that out, because Zoom is a great resource, but it doesn't fully integrate with Chromebooks. And so our new tech manager is really digging into that issue to find us some solutions in terms of breakout rooms and things like that. So the answer is yes. I just don't know exactly how to look at.
Okay, great. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Adrian, you're unmuted.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So I actually just have a comment first and then a question. So I just wanted to say that I think one of the other callers mentioned, you know, that they were working at a private school, and just recognizing that the majority of the private schools in this area are going back full time in person. So this curriculum option really exaggerates the difference between haves and have-nots. And it just seems like if there could be a better plan for scheduling in-person full learning, considering the space we have available or remote locations, and obviously how much we pay in taxes. So that's just my statement. I don't really need you guys to respond to that. I understand it's probably really difficult, and I know you guys are working through what you have. But just seeing that, you know, people are deciding to put their children in private schools because they do have the option to go back, is just something to consider. So I think one of the other callers had mentioned their 5-year-old. I have a 5-year-old who is going into kindergarten. So just when thinking about that in-person remote learning, I have a lot of the same concerns. I just want to understand, you know, if somebody's sitting in a classroom with a facilitator or teacher, you know, how does the in-person remote learning align with the current pediatric screen time recommendations for children? You know, specifically kindergarten age kids, because I just think about if the basic building blocks for kindergarten are usually learning to read, learning to write, and basic math. You know, I think a lot of that is really hard to grasp via screen, versus obviously just trying to create a hybrid 1 to 2 day a week model, like I think District 67 is doing, so that at least they have a little bit more of that in-person structured learning with an actual teacher, versus just sitting at a screen all day.
So thanks, Adrian. And I do want to address that. Again, our goal is to have an actual kindergarten teacher in those kindergarten classrooms facilitating the experience. And like we talked about, it will not be screen time for 5 hours regardless if the student is in school with us or without. The logistical issue that we run into with kindergarten that's hard, and it's pre-K 2 and even first grade and some second grade. We know that play-based instruction is developmentally right?
Right.
Is to have kids interacting, collaborating, playing with the same materials, dramatic play, you know, role playing, all those things. And the roadblock that we're coming up against is we cannot have kids sharing materials that way. We can't even have them that close. So we know that the way we need to structure it is quick snippets of whatever we're doing. So a quick mini lesson, we know that's good, best practice. They get off the screen, they talk to the teacher that's there, maybe they have a conversation, they get up out of their seats, they do some kind of movement, they sit down, they do some work, because that direct instruction on the remote platform is just to keep kids at the same pace, that same scope and sequence. So the kids at home and the kids at school are experiencing the same framework.
Right.
When they're in with us, we're going to do the best we can to adhere to those best practices. And again, I just want to reiterate, I'm not suggesting that we want to have some kind of, like we don't want to have a robot there facilitating just them watching a screen all day. We want it to be a kindergarten teacher, a first grade teacher, a second grade teacher. I'm just being realistic that we are going to lose staff through this experience. We're going to have staff who will be sick, who will be in close contact, or will have to be self-quarantined. And I cannot guarantee it as much as I can guarantee the consistency probably on the remote side. But we know what best practice is for kindergarten, pre-K, and also first and second grade. And, we're going to do the absolute best we can with the kids who choose to be with us to make that happen.
And I was really pleased to hear that you guys are thinking about, putting tents up and working outside. I definitely think for, some of the smaller kids, I mean, I guess you could probably argue both points, but I do think that that would be a great option because it gives them the ability to, maybe have a little bit more of that structured lesson time versus just sitting at a computer. Whereas, a second grader, third grader, fourth grader, fifth grader can sit in a classroom in front of a screen a lot easier than the younger kids can.
It's not even great for them. I mean, it's not great for any of us.
Right.
I have children 15, 10, and 8. It wasn't great for them,
Right.
when they were doing that at home with me. So yes, we have secured tents, a tent for each building. We've also scouted out the outdoor spaces. There are guidelines around outdoor spaces. We have to keep any group that's outside, the individuals in the group 6 feet apart and the groups 30 feet apart. So our building administrators, Jay and Michelle Grady from the union, we've all kind of scouted out the outdoor, kind of tried to map out spaces where we can rotate kids through those outdoor spaces. So again, I don't want to downplay that we are planning for all of that when students, and that's, we recognize that we're giving that choice and that when kids come to us, it has to be the best experience that we can make it here. I just want to be transparent about the fact it's not going to look the same as it normally.
Thank you.
Adrian, we're going to take maybe one more question because I know my admin team has meetings scheduled at this point. I do want to say though, if you have other questions, please send them to us, put them on, in an email. We'll respond to you. We'll give you a call. We're going to try to add these to our FAQ as well. So maybe one more.
It's Angela. Go ahead, Angela.
Angela, you might need to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hi, Angela.
Hi, sorry. So first of all, thank you to everything the admin is doing. I know you guys are going to keep working really hard. And teachers too, I really appreciate everything that they are going to do. And that being said, a lot has been put on their shoulders in terms of this great curriculum that they're going to create. And I know they're going to be able to do it. They're going to do a fantastic job. I'm just curious, what resources are they getting? What assistance are they getting to make this happen? Because at this point, making the decision, the plan is so hard, and now they have to run with it. And just, as the parent of an incoming kindergartner, I just want to know that they're getting enough to make this all possible for our kids. So what is in place to help them, resources-wise, assistance?
Thank you for asking that question. That is certainly a priority for us. One of the reasons we shifted the start of school to August 25th was to give us more time with our teachers. It only gives us a week. So we will have 5 days where teachers will be with us, either remote or with us in person, to provide some professional development and time for them to collaborate. But we also are looking at, now that this plan is solidified and once we get our schedules a little bit more solidified so we can provide them with a framework, lots of professional development opportunities between now and the beginning of the school year that they can participate in voluntarily, bring them in, help them with, structuring curriculum and content, talking through some of the issues that we talked about today, how to make sure we're doing what's right for our kids. So that is certainly a priority for us. Kelly, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think Thank you for the question. It's a really great one, and something that is always taking up space in my brain as I think about our teachers. I'm really proud of many of the core resources and programs that we have adopted over the last several years, and I would say they are on this. The programs are pushing information out and continuing to make sure that their resources are adapting to the remote learning that so many schools across the country are having to shift to. And so we're going to be leaning on those resources. Some of them do have add-ons and things that we will need to purchase, and we are looking into making sure that we can get those pieces and components as quickly as possible so that the teachers have time to wrap their heads around the shifts that they will need to make. I hope that that's helpful.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And again, thanks for everything you guys are doing and looking out for our kids. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Angela. I do want to just recognize an admin team if you need to drop off. I appreciate your time today. Those of you on the call, please recommend this. If it was helpful to you, please recommend to others who have questions, but also I just encourage anyone that has questions to reach out to us with the questions. We recognize this is difficult. We really are trying to address the various needs of the community, the various beliefs and priorities of the community in a plan that we think is flexible, that will create a situation where we can have consistency for our students throughout the school year. So again, thank you to everybody who joined us today. Reach out to us with anything you want. We are looking forward to the school year. It's going to be great. We have amazing teachers that will make it amazing no matter what parents choose. So thanks again, and have a great week.